All right, everybody. We have been on a long break at the Flower Podcast because we're doing so many new things behind the scenes that we can't wait to share with you, but it's not time for that yet. So we are diving into a great episode today. I'm excited to have not only somebody who does amazing work, but somebody who I know here in Nashville, Meg Hutchinson from the Florista. Welcome to the Flower Podcast.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for having me.
I know I have had so much fun getting to know you since I moved here and seeing how you do things and the amazing work you create. And I know you travel, you do everything from corporate to weddings and events. How did you get started in the world of flowers?
Yeah, so I always like to kind of joke around that like my flower story kind of starts when I was actually really, really young. I was actually born in Holland, Michigan, and as a grower, you probably know it's where like Tulip Festival happens. And so growing up, like just as like a little kid, my mom was kind of like a backyard gardener, and I just always remember flowers being around and my grandmother grew. And so flowers were just always kind of a part of my childhood. So, you can like look back at like all these little photos of me and I was like making flower arrangements in little like daisy sour cream containers when I was like 4 years old. So
I
like
love
as a
it.
kid, yeah, I used to tell people that my dream job, like when I grow up, instead of wanting to be like, a scientist or a doctor or an astronaut, I wanted to be a florist. And so that was kind of what I wanted to do, like from a very young age. And I kind of like stuck with it until I was probably in like fifth or sixth grade. I was like going strong, like telling people like, I'm going to be a florist when I grow up. I'm going to be a florist. And people would always ask me, like, oh, you want to install flooring? That's so interesting. Like, like little children did not know what a floor. And I was like, no, I want to like arrange flowers. And kids were just like, okay, cool. But then when I was in high school, I kind of went off in a different direction. I actually went to college for nursing school. And when I was in nursing school, I was like 2 years into it and I just like hated it. And I had an internship at a hospital and I just like could not imagine going to work in a hospital every day. And it was like horrifying to me. I was like, this is not the job for me. And I distinctly remember being a sophomore in college and like talking to my mom on the phone. And she was like, well, you always said you wanted to be a florist. Like, why don't you do that? And so I kind of pondered on it for a while. And I was home for Christmas, I guess, like after my sophomore year or like during my sophomore year. And one morning I woke up and I was like, Mom, I'm going to be a florist. And I drove back to my college that day and I changed my major from nursing to business because there was no floristry anything.
Right.
And I started like applying for jobs at flower shops and no one would hire me because I had no experience. And this was Christmas time, so it was about to be like Valentine's Day. And so I started looking for like floral schools so I could get experience. And I kind of like weaseled my way through my college's honors program to get them to pay for me to go to the Tallulah Rose Floral School in Bath, England for college credit. So that was where I started doing flowers. And that was obviously just like the most amazing experience ever. I was
Can't
there
imagine.
for a month and I kind of, oh my gosh, like literally the best. And I got a really good foundation there and it was kind of different. And so when I came back after that summer, entering my junior year, I was super involved at the University of Tennessee and people just kind of started asking me to do events and I started doing events for the school. At the same time, I knew that I really wanted to have like a strong business foundation to doing flowers. So I was also really like getting involved in entrepreneurship. And so I was entering lots of pitch competitions too to like get funding to start a floral business. And I was able to win like I think like 50 or $60,000 in seed
What?
funding. Yeah. Well, and also around this time, I was working part-time as a barista, which is actually where the name the Florista came from because I was a florist and a barista. And so I was in a funding competition. The judge was like, you got to call it that. Like, that's what your business needs to be called. So I was doing that in school and I got I was just entering all these pitch competitions and I was kind of going down this entrepreneurship realm. And I got connected actually with randomly like Victoria's Secret through a funding competition. And so they brought me out to LA to do flowers for the Teen Vogue Summit. And I was, graduating college and just starting this flower thing. And that was in 2019. So immediately after COVID started, and I had been planning to move to LA to start a flower company there because I wanted to do flowers and film. And immediately after COVID was a thing, and it brought me back to Nashville, and I moved back in with my parents and had no idea really like what was going to happen. So I just started taking weddings here. And then here I am.
Wow.
That's
Exploded.
a journey.
That
Yeah.
is a journey. So I've got to go back to the school in England because that's a question I get a lot of. What kind of, is there a good school I would recommend and things like that? And, there's various ones that I've had the opportunity to get to know some of the teachers and things. But this school, I don't know much about, even though I see a lot of their stuff out there, their work out there.
Yeah.
And what was it like learning? I mean, how long were you there on that program?
Yeah, so I was there for I think a little over a month. It was like a career change course was what it was called. And Rachel, who's the owner of the school, Rachel Wardley, she's just like the most fabulous person I've ever met in my life. She's still like so supportive of my business today. It was incredible. I mean, British flowers are just incredible. And you're in Bath, which is I think like an hour, maybe two outside of London. So like every morning she would like wake up and go to the Chelsea flower market and like bring back just like the most incredible product. And she really was big on like mechanics and teaching foundations in flowers, which I think is honestly so important because I think as someone who now, hires a lot and I have a lot of contract laborers coming in, I find a lot of times you have a ton of like super self-taught florists or florists who just kind of bounce around from studio to studio. And occasionally they're missing kind of like that fundamental mechanics basis. So I always say that like I would recommend going to a program to at least start because I think you get such a grounding in like how to do the basics, which I'm always someone where I'm like, if I can learn how to do the basic stuff really well, I know I can grow on that. And so that was kind of where I got that. And so it was kind of a crash course on all things flowers. We had a week where we did, like bouquets, and then weeks where we learned how to do centerpieces. We did a whole like wedding course. We even went into like funeral work and like how to do like casket sprays and all that kind of stuff. So kind of just like really quick, like learning how to like properly do the basics. But I think she was really fundamental in like teaching us that like, she would always say like, we would make these things and, as a student, you're looking for feedback. And she'd always tell us, as long as you're like making something that can stand up, that's safe and that like you love it, you're moving in the right direction. So she was really big in like kind of teaching me about like learning different styles and how like flowers, I always say it, are like inherently beautiful and just how to make them look their best. So I love the Tallulah Rose Floral School. I've actually encouraged two other people who I'm close to. Actually, one of my brides this year went, and then another gal who worked for me went, and just everyone has had the most incredible experience. So I cannot recommend it enough.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you for that testimonial. Because, I mean, it really, I agree. I feel like a lot of times those basic foundations, a lot of times when you're self-taught, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of, that's going to be my word this year, I think. There's a lot of details that are behind the scenes. It's easy to miss. It's easy to not pick up on those things. And having someone who can teach you them and also give you constructive criticism on how to make it better, I think is also huge. I mean, tremendous.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. It's hard to get that like on the job training. Sometimes that can ruin or impact your reputation with your clients and other clients. And you don't want to take a chance on that. So I think that's really smart.
Totally. I think it was like super fundamental. And, I think it was really the beginning building block of like learning how to make bigger things and like better things was just like I knew that I could do the really simple things really well. And that gave me the confidence to move into like larger installations and, just doing things doing things that no one can teach you how to do because they haven't necessarily been made before. But when you know the
Mm.
building blocks of how to make it, I think it's really important to be able to kind of level up in your design work.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's exciting to be able to push yourself too, to
Yeah.
do things that have not been made before or create, something that, that's going to fit into this archway or this window or whatever the space is you're trying to fill. And
Right.
yeah, the mechanics that's exciting though. I really think it is.
Yeah. No, it
Well,
is.
before we get too much farther, take a second and describe what your business really is, because if someone's not familiar with your work already, I know I don't want to say you're a specialist, but you kind of are in a way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So we are like a boutique floral design company that focuses mostly on weddings, but then we also do a large amount of corporate work. And I think around the Nashville area and just kind of within our realms, we've become really well known for our installation work. We really specialize in like really colorful, bold, vibrant designs. Our like business slogan, sorry, is flowers that wow. And that was just like something that continuously my clients would say to me, like, oh my gosh, like I was so wowed. Your flowers were amazing. Like my guests couldn't believe it. And so I think we really just focus on like really strong customer experiences through flowers. I want to always be making installs that people have never seen before, using things that people have never seen before. I never want to like cut and paste flower designs. I really am always like, pushing my team and pushing the design envelope with my clients to be like, okay, like I hear this is what you want, but like, I know you don't know what I'm talking about, but what if I told you I could make it better? So I think that in terms of like what we do, is just really creating, memorable experiences for clients, whether it's down that corporate road or at a wedding. So I think that's mostly what we do.
Yeah.
But we also build a lot of things too. That's the other thing, which I'm really into. I love a craft. I love, any way that I can use flowers to just kind of like create larger than life things.
I love that. I know someone was showing me today some of your work at Import at the wholesale house, and it was something you did for, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it was a blue jean something or other, and that whole backdrop with you had cut up strips of jeans or whatever. I'm like, I can't imagine how long that took, but I'm like, what an impact. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, the blue jean walls. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Anybody listening to this, please never ask me to make a blue jean wall ever again. I made so many at this point. But yeah, so when I was kind of getting really into flowers, I kind of learned that I could use these mechanics that we've been talking about to create installations out of mediums that weren't flowers all the time. So it was always, and it still is a really big selling point that like, hey, I can come into an event and I can make you a really cool installation, but I can also do the flowers. So it kind of became a big thing that I did. But the blue jean wall was actually from my mom's store. My mom has a store in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of here. And when she was opening up, she really wanted me to create an installation of some sort. And so she sells like vintage clothing. And so I was like, what if I created this denim wall? And my idea was that I was going to create this like frayed denim wall. And it's like an 8x8 wall. And I had to hand cut every piece of denim, wash it, fray it, and then like I tied it into chicken wire panels, and it created this really cool kind of like ombre denim wall. And then we put a neon sign over it that said Blue Jean Baby on it. And I always tell my mom that it was like the worst project I've ever done, but it caught the attention actually of Carrie Underwood's team. She was releasing an album called Denim and Rhinestones. And through mutual connections, they reached out to us and they were like, will you make one of these walls for an event we have coming up? And I'm like, no, not this again. But I did do it. So and her team bought it. And it's in their offices somewhere. So there's another denim wall floating out there. But Any kind of project like that, I'm just all about.
Well, the thing I love about it is, that's a project. Like if you're doing for an event, a wedding, a corporate event, that's something you can do days ahead, months ahead. I mean, you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
That's not something you have to, like flowers, like the
Yeah.
clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And even though, I mean, it's not like you want to be up till midnight cutting denim
No.
strips, but it's still something that you can work on your downtime
Yeah.
and make, repurpose that time almost.
Totally. Well, and
Um,
it's really stuff, projects like that have been really fundamental too in like hiring employees. So, like, I'm so lucky. I have my business, but I also have three, salaried full-time employees who are with me all the time. And they are just the shining lights of my life. I love them all. But, one of the things that I know people do struggle a lot with employment in this industry is seasonality. And so we are constantly just coming up with different ways that we can have projects that we're creating in the off season. So like right now, for example, we have a wedding this summer that's actually like it's like a goth wedding, and they're extremely creative. They have a really cool vision for it, but they have this vision of they want these trees going down their aisle, but they don't want them to be not like living trees, like kind of imagine like spooky fake like black trees with no leaves and Spanish moss. And so we during the off season, in between obviously booking out for this year, have been constructing these trees. And we found a woman who like forages bark outside of town, and we've been collecting bark and dyeing it black with like paint and water mixture and just like creating these trees, which is crazy because it's a huge installation. It takes a lot of time, but we can do that in the off season. And so I can provide, employment to people year round because we have these long-term projects that we're making all the time. And I really think it's been those really creative things outside of flowers that have like been able to propel us into like having sustainable careers for everyone, that they can kind of always have things going on.
sure, sure. Well, and that's a big deal. I mean, you still have bills to pay 12 months a year, right? And
Oh yeah.
so, and it's way easier, I think. And I know sometimes it's hard because as a flower farmer, as certain types of floral businesses, it's harder to fill those gaps in the off seasons.
Hmm.
And but yet you want to keep your people because you've trained them. You guys work like a finely tuned machine, and everybody gets along. And you don't want to take they've got bills to pay. You don't want to take a chance and messing up the
Right.
team. So I totally get that. So
Totally. Yeah.
yeah, interesting. That makes me think about. I know recently. Well, I don't know if it was recently or not. I want to say maybe the end of last year. Did you go through a rebranding last year?
I did, yes.
Okay.
An in-house rebranding. So, my employee Grace, who is just fabulous, she was a design student at Belmont, the university here.
Mhm.
And when I went through a huge hiring process, I thought I was hiring for one part-time role, but ended up hiring two gals who are now in full-time roles, just because I love them both so much. But Grace, when she came through, she had no floral design experience, but I could tell just from like her resume and like our initial conversations that she just had this like really keen eye for design. And she really demonstrated off the bat that she had like a great work ethic. And I was like, I can teach this girl how to do flowers for sure. Like I always say that's a little offshoot, but like I always say, like, it's hard to teach work ethic. It's hard to teach like a good eye,
Yes,
but like I can teach anyone how to do flowers if they have both those things.
I
So
agree.
I decided to, kind of, I don't want to say take a chance on her because she was just like really a shoe in, but she had this strong design background, and the logo we had for the Florista had been a logo that I had literally drawn on my iPad when I was in college, like dreaming of becoming a florist. And it had just been that for years, and I had loved it, but it just felt time for kind of like a revamp. And around the same time, I'd also hired Eve, my other new employee who worked for me. And she was, we do large events mostly, and she's, phenomenal designer. She came from California, And she was much more interested in taking small events. And so we were kind of like opening up this idea of like, okay, well, what if we have Eve taking on small events and we want to do a rebrand? And it just felt like a really great time to kind of like redefine the brand and what it looked like. And I decided that Grace was the best for the job because she was, with us all the time. And I just knew that there was going to be nobody who understood better the vision that
Right.
like I really imagined for the business. And so, we had lots of conversations like, do you want this to be part of like your florista work? Do you want me to bill you, as a contractor who's doing a rebrand for me? And we eventually just decided to do it in house. And it was such a cool process to kind of talk about like the root and the base of like what I wanted the brand to feel like and kind of like the image I wanted to push forward. And, she just absolutely killed it. It like, I mean, it's mine, so I love it, but we get tons of compliments all the time on it. We did a lot of video work and like, big branding photo shoot associated with it. And I think it really did a great job of like kind of making the brand feel a little bit more mature because I think before that it did kind of have this feeling of like, I don't know, to me, I was still attached to like, I'm just out of college, like I'm scrappy, I'm making it work. Whereas I feel like, really being able to sit down with someone on my team, I think we were able to elevate it and then, also introduce all these new offerings within the business, which was just really a cool experience. I don't think many people get to do something in-house like that. So it was so fun. I was really sad when it was over because I was like, what? We're not going to have all these little fun branding meetings now where I get to like look at color swatches and fonts. And it was just such a cool thing.
Well, I can appreciate that. And I feel like sometimes, I don't know, I feel like a lot of times people step into sort of their logos, into their colors. Like it's not really thought about. It's one of those things
Mhm.
that it just accidentally happens. And then
Right,
that you just keep it up. You just keep doing the same thing. And so,
right.
I think it's smart because, the company you are now versus the company you are when you began, I mean, it's night and day different,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
And obviously you're getting the attention of corporate people that are looking for events and parties and things, and you're probably looking people are looking to you that also want to rebrand and also
Yeah.
are trying to do, or trying to
Oh
carry
my
their
gosh.
brand through their event.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. If somebody is starting off, what do you think is important? Like, what are some important pieces for stepping into that process?
That's a great question. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to Rachel, who was, in charge of the Tallulah Rose Floral School, and she always told us. She said when we were like, coming out of this school, this 1 month program, and offering advice to all of us, she said that her number one advice to us was that we should never say no to something when it
Mm,
comes up. She was like, you're gonna leave this program and you're going to feel like, like, okay, I can make a bridal bouquet, a centerpiece, and like maybe a 2 cluster arbor. And she was like, and you're going to have someone approach you and they're going to ask you for something you don't think you can do. And she's like, I really encourage you to say yes to it, even if you don't think you can do it. Cause she was like, I promise you can. And so, I was like, what, like 20 at the time. I had like all the confidence in the world. I like really went out of the school thinking I was going to be a hot shot. And so immediately, like I said, my university was offering me these pretty large events, which truly I had no business taking, but I just started saying yes. And, same thing with like the Teen Vogue Summit in LA. I rolled up like one man show to California. Bought out in LA for the first time. I mean, I wasn't even old enough to rent a car. There was like a big issue when I got there, like the rental car company wouldn't let me rent it because I wasn't old enough. But like I just kept saying yes. And it was like, I looking back, I don't think I was necessarily ready, but I knew how to do a good job and I did know how to deliver that final product. And I think just like really stepping outside of your comfort zone and like saying yes to those things is how the things build on a lot faster. And I think that like to anyone starting, I always said just like be bold, say yes when you don't think you can do it. Like there's like so many people behind you who believe they can. If they didn't think you couldn't do it, they wouldn't ask you, And so I
True.
think to anyone getting started, like I just think to really be bold and believe in yourself. Find the fundamentals, get those down. But once you have those down, I think you can really start taking off from there.
Sure. And then, I mean, I think that's really important. And I feel like a lot of times imposter syndrome,
Yeah,
and, a lot of people suffer from that. I mean, I think everybody does to some extent. And then your ability to push through that is a lot of times where you get to that next level.
totally.
But, there's fear, there's self-doubt, there's all those things that go with that. And I feel like that is really, I love that advice, because a lot of times you can figure it out, or you might know some, especially now. I mean, you think about it, think about the people you know.
Yeah,
You might know somebody that can help you figure out something.
right.
I know we'll get to something later that I know I want to talk about because I thought it was fascinating. But going back to branding, though, just real quick,
Yeah.
there's a lot of details I think people get hung up with. Whether it's colors, whether it's logos, whether, do you get a professional graphic person to design it? Do you, is it just that, or is there more to it than that?
Like, I don't know. I think that like it's different for everyone. I think in general, when it comes to me, and I think, the people who know me really well will tell you this, I am like a fast decision maker. Like, I know what I want. Like, it was a lot of like picking logos, picking colors, and things like that. But it also was like so much of like telling a story, which I think was
Hmm,
really important. So I think that
sure.
like almost the background of like, what it actually looked like came really naturally, because I think what Grace did really well was really kind of figure out the story that like I wanted to tell, and like kind of dive into the background of like the things that really inspired me. Like, for example, when we sat down, I'm really inspired by like a lot of like vintage designs. And, I mentioned my mom has a vintage store. So I was like really attracted to like vintage fonts and patches. And then at the same time, when I was a kid, which this sounds so silly saying it out loud, but I was super involved in like the National History Day program. And I did this presentation on Rosie the Riveter and the idea of like, women who took over the assembly line during World War II. And I went to DC with that project, but I just always really been inspired by this idea of like hardworking women who like knew how to get their hands dirty. And I felt like that was like an area of floristry that was really untouched. Like I felt like when I would look at all these branding photos of other florists, which they're all beautiful, they just felt very curated and beautiful. And like we always joke around, like our warehouse is like outside of the dump, like we're lugging ladders around, it's dirty, it's grimy, we're working long hours. And so the little coin we kind of termed was like we wanted a brand that felt gritty but girly.
Oh, I
And
love that.
so yeah, because it was just like we didn't want it to feel all like frills and butterflies, like we wanted it to feel floral and beautiful, because at the end of the day, that's what we were providing. But like we wanted to show kind of like the hard work and the oomph behind it. And so I think once we kind of got that storyline down, everything else came really naturally. There's a palette of colors that we always joke around, like I've just been obsessed with since I started doing flowers, like coral, orange, chartreuse, and yellow, kind of like in that wheelhouse. Like that was kind of a non-negotiable. I was like, next question. And then, with the fonts, it all just kind of came together. But I really think kind of figuring out what your story is like the key to just making it all kind of flow together.
I love that. That's not something I was expecting you to say. So I could see though where that getting through that process or getting to that point allows the other things to start to fall in place. And then
Yeah.
does it fit that storyline, or does it not? Because that's
Yeah.
what it's about. That's cool. I really like that.
Thank you.
Well, so I understand that, if you have followed Meg on social media, if you have seen some of her work, she does love color. She's a girl that loves some color, and she does a great job with it. She does a great job with scale. She's just super talented when it comes to all of this. Being that I see a little bit, I don't see the whole thing, but I see a little bit behind the scenes when it comes to your process of, designing your look or for an event, for something specific,
Mhm.
and the process you go about and kind of figuring out what you need. And so I'm fascinated by this a little bit. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like in a lot of ways, your process is freeing. It's like, I don't know. I don't put words in your mouth. So I'm gonna let you tell us about it, and how you go about sort of, figuring out what you need to order, placing your
Yeah.
orders, how you budget things, how you mark things up, all those things, because they're all connected, right?
Right, right. Yeah, I've definitely been told by, all my wholesalers throughout the year that I have one of the most chaotic buying processes of all time. Um, yeah, you included, like, everyone is just kind of like, what is going on in there? Because I very I'm very against ordering. I occasionally I'm placing more orders nowadays that we've opened up kind of like a second branch of someone designing for me than I truly ever have. And like I've got an order in for my wedding next weekend because it's Valentine's Day. But
Smart
yeah,
move.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it was at the reminder of multiple people that were like, "Hey, Valentine's Day is next week. Like, you have a wedding. You should probably like order something." But no, I just, I'm really big about using seasonal flowers and seasonal colors, and it's something I always really push my brides to do. And so, you know, I'm kind of going to open up with the broad fact that I don't order a lot at all. And even being here in Nashville where like I shop with you at Import and you guys have a phenomenal selection, but it's not like we're in LA or New York, there's not like a huge crazy flower market. But, um, I just always with my brides have been very big about like, I always ask them, do you want me to like promise you certain flowers or do you want me to deliver on your vision? And that kind of
Hmm,
always stumps them for a second.
I
They're
like
like,
that.
yeah, I'm just kind of like, you know, I can I can talk to a bride and, corporate events are a little bit different, but I can talk to a bride and a lot of times like really quickly I understand exactly what they want. Um, a lot of times like I'll see a photo or two and I'm like, okay, I get it. I get what you want. I'm really easily able to tell like, can I do that in season? Can I not? Um, and I'm really lucky, especially lately, most of the people have been wanting very in season stuff. I just think that's where the trends have kind of pushed people. I think, wedding narrative has kind of been like, oh, choose flowers in season because they're going to be cheaper, which I'm like, that's not true. But, I love that narrative because we should be pushing flowers in season anyway.
Right.
But yeah, so I always just kind of ask people, do you want me to promise you, three tulips and a sweet pea? Or do you want me to look at your photo and tell you I can give you exactly what you want and you like these three colors? And so that's kind of the way we operate. We send out visual proposals that have, examples of things. We used to do like a primary pull list, is what we'd call it, where we put sunflowers, but we don't even really put that anymore. But my big thing is that I don't promise my brides anything I know I can't get. And I see that a lot in this industry, like when I'll start talking to people, someone will be like, oh, I wanted this very specific thing. And my florist told me it was going to happen a week before they called me and said they couldn't get dahlias in March. Like, I'm like, why did you tell them you could get dahlias in March in the first place? Like, you probably can't. And so I think it's just like really setting expectation to be able to open up like a buying process that's really like free and it's just based on like what looks best, And so I a lot of times the way I kind of price it out because I think the pricing becomes a big question is people are like, how do you go in and pull flowers for, a 30, 40, $50,000 event, which you don't know they're going to be there. And I think this is the part where sometimes I might stress out my wholesalers a little bit, who I'm great friends with all of them, but I think they're probably like, what, you're crazy? Is like, I just really pay attention to what you guys have and what you're going to have. And, I keep logs of like what I'm buying during different seasons. Not to say that growing seasons don't change a little bit, but I really haven't promised my bride anything going in. So I'm able to go in and pull kind of whatever I'm feeling. And so, like, if the Campanula looks great, like, and it's purple and she loves purple, I'm going to get it. And, sometimes, I'll go outside of kind of, if I have a bride who I think would be okay with it, like, sometimes I'll pull in a color that maybe we didn't talk about, but like, I know is going to look really awesome. And the way I do my pricing is I just do everything percentage based. And so, like, I'll say 20% of my budget is going to go to my flower buy, and I calculate out what that number is. I know going into the wholesaler, I have $7,000 to spend, and I can truly really eyeball what that's going to cost. In fact, it's a game I play, with you guys a lot where
You're pretty
like,
amazing at it.
yeah, like I can kind of look at a cart and be like, yeah, that's going to be $7,000. And, usually I'm within a couple $100 of it. And then, I'll take my bill that I got from you guys, and you guys will bring the flowers to me within a day or two, and I go and I write my recipes based on what I bought. So I, have an Excel spreadsheet, and I also write what I call loose recipes. And so I really like all of my designers, we kind of have a basis of what we said of like what we want our designs to look like our Florista style. And I make mock-ups of everything, but I don't really like to dictate like the exact amount of product that's going to be in there. I'm really big on saying like, if I have on my recipe sheet to put 5 roses in, but you make the arrangement, it looks great with 3, don't put 5 in. Like, I don't want you to overcrowd the arrangement. Put 3 in, it's good. If you have one where you put 5 roses in, but you think it could use 7, put 7 in there, and when I buy, I always leave a little bit of wiggle room. So like, maybe just because I've used the number 7,000 a few times, like I'll leave $1,000 in the reserves. And so if midweek, I was off on that recipe and people are finding they need to use a little bit more, I'll just go buy more. So that's kind of how we do it. And to be totally honest, it works really well. It kind of, I think it just creates like the most beautiful designs, because I truly think every time I get to go in and pick the stuff that looks the best.
Well,
So
I think
how we
that's
do
the
it.
key. I think that's the thing about the seasonal aspect of it, is you're picking the flowers that are at their best in that moment, in that time of year,
Yeah.
and you're not fighting to get things open or not fighting. Yeah, I mean, there's always something, but you're not, as a rule of thumb, you're not that trout swimming upstream. You're going with the flow, and I
Yeah,
think that does make things easier in a lot of ways. But I know
totally.
there's people out there that are probably um, stressing right this very moment, because they're like, well, how do you know you have enough stuff? Like, how do you know,
Yeah.
did you buy enough of whatever that item is? And I get that you just know because you've been doing this and the look you're after, but do you kind of think about like, how much greenery do I need, or how many roses do I like, focal flowers, or I mean, do you break it down in your head that way at all, or is it just?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like, okay, like, let's talk about like a box of Smilax. Like, and this is so hard because I do think so much of it is visual and just also like experience. Like, I haven't been doing this for like 30 years. I've been doing it for like 7, but I think I truly use every event as a learning opportunity. I think I've just become really good at visualizing spaces. And so, I can look at a room and they're like, okay, we want, greenery all up in the ceiling. And I can look at it and be able to say, like, okay, that's going to take 2, maybe 3 boxes of Smilax, and I'm keeping that in mind when I'm pricing things out too. And that's also how I price, it's almost backwards. But, I can look at it and I can be like, okay, that's 2, 3 boxes of Smilax, let's put a third in there and then add some wiggle room in the pricing of it. And then, if we have half a box of Smilax left, we'll add it into something else. But things like roses, I think that, I can kind of just ballpark it. Like if I have 30 centerpieces and I know I put 5 in each one, I'm
Yeah.
approximately going to need 150 roses. But I don't even think that necessarily like I'm thinking that when I go in. I think I just truly have like kind of memorized like what the flower load looks like. And I just kind of know. And like I know that's such a like unteachable thing to like tell someone, but I think it's just because I've let go of so much control in it that I just know it's going to work. And I think that's such a type B way to think about it. But I think to any type A person right now, they're probably like, what in the world is this girl doing? But I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think it's about finding what works best for you. If this isn't something that like works best for someone, like, don't do it that way. Like, I know it's a very strange way to order, to buy, to price, but if you can make it work, and, you know, I'm really lucky to say that we're a super profitable business, and like it's just what works best for us to kind of go into it with like very little control, and just like I think at the end of the day, flowers are beautiful, and I know how much I need to make the event work, and I think that as long as my brides trust me, I just know that I'm going to make it happen.
Well, I feel like in a way, it's so funny because um, my wife and I get into these conversations because she is innately a great cook. Obviously, you look at me,
Hmm.
you can tell she's a great cook, right? And so anyway, and a lot of times I'm like, did you write that recipe down? Do you know? And it's like, no, she didn't. I'm like, well,
I'm the
how
same way.
how are you going to cook that again? Well, I know basically what I did, and that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, with certain recipes, like I think about baking or things that are a more exact science, she has a hard time with. And it's
Yeah.
because, if you have just too much of this baking powder or too whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm good with that though.
Yeah,
But it's the same kind of thing in a way. I feel
it
like
is.
that if you can get your mind shifting from this I need 67 stems of Tweedia and realize, okay, I'm after a look, and give
Hmm.
yourself the permission that, okay, if you've been doing this for a while, you probably could change your paradigm a little bit and understand,
Yeah.
you know what? Maybe I don't need this, this, and this. Maybe I'm putting myself in this box with my clients
Yeah.
because I'm trying to promise something, feeling like I need to do that. And in
Right.
actuality, I love what you said earlier, where do you want the specific flowers or do you want the look?
Yeah.
Because they don't always be equal, create the same thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's just about like also, I think it kind of plays into like the artistry of it. I think like a lot of like, I tend, I want to fall more in the category of like a highly artistic florist. I look at it as an art form, not necessarily it's like a cut and paste. Like, I don't want all of my centerpieces to look the same. Like, I don't want all of my designs to look the same. I want them to look their best in like their most artistic form. I want them to be cohesive. I want them to flow
Mm.
together, but I don't necessarily want them to look the same. And so I think that, listening to, I think maybe it was Sean Strong, in one of his videos that he made a long time, he was talking about the fact that he doesn't recipe. And I think I've heard a few other of the florists that I really look up to that were saying that they don't recipe out. And I was like, it just like clicked in my head that I was like, and when I started, I didn't really recipe. And it wasn't until I was doing these, large productions that I think I occasionally had like the type A freelancer come in and be like, there are no recipes. Like, what do I do? And I think that was also a time when I kind of learned like the type of designer I really meshed well with was someone who just like knew that it was going to work and wanted to do it in the most artistic way possible. And so I really think it's kind of created like this cool dynamic that we have where I think we have the mindset of like we can make anything look beautiful. And, I think that when I started doing flowers, or when I kind of started entertaining the idea of doing flowers, there were all these flowers that I thought like weren't good flowers. I'd be like, oh, I don't want to use carnations. Oh, I don't want to use mums. I don't want to use this. And then I think as we've kind of like had this mindset, I think it kind of opens up the world of what you can use. Like, one of my favorite things I made last year was actually just something we did in studio just to kind of like practice design techniques with my team, was that I decided I wanted to make an arbor completely out of mums because it was fall and you guys had like the most beautiful mums I'd ever seen. And if you had told me in 2021 that I was going to make an arbor completely out of mums, I'd be like, oh, that's going to look cheap. It's not going to look good. But I think just because like we've created this mentality where it's about the artistry. It's not necessarily about like in depth of what the medium is. It was one of my favorite things we made last year. I thought it was so beautiful because we were able to like, it was like peak mum season and the colors were amazing. And, you know, you had the little button mums and then like local mums that just, it was truly like, I think one of the most beautiful things I've ever made. And I think that it's just because we've decided that like we can make anything look good. We just have to like really believe in the artistry behind it and the technique.
Well, and I think, and I want to say this for those of you, you know, who've not done it this way, that once you do it a few times, there's a learning curve, I'm sure.
Hmm.
But as you do it, then I feel like it gets easier.
Yeah.
And, you know, because like when I watch you from the sidelines, and and of course, I always love to see what you pull because as a
Hmm.
buyer, I'm like, okay, what does Meg, what is she seeing? You know, how is she seeing it? And I want to like, okay, does that mean I want to buy more of this or less of this or maybe buy a different color, whatever? And so as a buyer, I'm always intrigued by that. And I'm glad you made the comment about local moms because one of the things I appreciate about you is your embracing of local product. And I feel
Yeah.
like there's just so much great potential there. But that is one of the hardest things to sometimes get exact numbers on. So
Yeah.
if you can embrace the look, the color, the style, you know, the texture, then you can embrace all of the goodness that you want at that moment. So
Yeah. No,
yeah,
totally. Well, and I think my advice too to anyone who kind of like wants to take a stab at what I'm going to call as chaos ordering, or chaos pulling for things, I think too, like we go into the mindset of like, oh my gosh, like I don't have enough, there's not enough, you know, local Lysianthus for me to put it in everything. You don't have to put in everything. Like pick a few pieces you want to put it in and then make sure it really has its moment to shine there. Like maybe I can only get 2 packs of, you know, caramel cherry phlox, which is like literally my favorite flower ever. Like, I'm not going to put one stem in each centerpiece. Like, I'm going to put 15 stems in the bridal bouquet, and then maybe I'm going to highlight it in the bar piece. I'm going to make sure it shows up more than one place. But I just use things I feel like strategically. And I think that like when you have the mindset of like, I'm going to go in and there are going to be things that are going to work, you don't really run into like the fear of like, oh my gosh, what if there aren't 150 Playa Blanca just sitting there because I can sub out, you know, and it's all about for me creating a cohesive look throughout the day and not necessarily using the same things in everything. So,
mm. Well, and I love that. I know we've had past guests that have mentioned that, so I appreciate you reiterating that. That sometimes it's okay to give those flowers moments in high visible areas, so that way they have that chance to shine. Because you're right, if you were to put one
yeah,
stem of phlox in every arrangement, it wouldn't show up at all. You would never see it, and
right.
half of it would be hidden. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And that's really something we do in our designs always is it's kind of a running joke with our freelancers. Like when a new freelancer comes in and they're like, oh, like how does the florista like to do things? Like, you know, like what's their design style? Like people always say like, oh, they're clustering, like they're doing clusters. And that's kind of a big buzzword for me is like I'm always very big, you know, I think of how flowers grow in a field. You know, like
sure,
if you have, you know, a crop of flowers, like you're not going to have like it's not like one cone flower here and one here. I call them polka dots. Like I feel like, and to each their own, you know, like everything is good, but I just think that I want my designs to look natural. And so like if I'm going to put one something there, I want my people to put 7 of them there, which I think also like kind of lends itself to not being recipeed out because like I might have one spot in an installation where someone has shoved 17 of a product in. And, you know, as long as we have 5 up so that it kind of, you know, mimics it like 5 stems so that it's not just showing up in one little random cluster, like I don't care how it's like divvied out. It just has to be there. But I want it to be kind of in those like very organic, clustered moments where everything kind of has its moment to shine because it's being supported by the things around it.
sure, sure. Well, okay, so after talking about this process, I know recently I was really curious because you had this big wedding. I think it was a wedding or event in Mexico.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, so how taking the Florista on the road, which I know you do travel with your business a
Yes.
lot. So
Yes.
this isn't a new thing, but the idea of sourcing product in another country, I think that's your first time doing that, right?
That was my first time in another country. I had done it. I would never recommend anyone to like have their first travel be out of country because boy, do our stories from that one. But yeah, we do a decent amount of travel. We go out to California a lot. You know, we've done stuff in Montana, Wyoming, New York. We've been all over the place. But yeah, sourcing in Mexico was a a trip. It was a whole new journey. I am a lot more ingrediented out when it comes to travel events. Like I am ordering because, you know, and I think, well, actually, like in California, no, I'm not because like I have the
Yeah,
LA
they have the
flower market. So
market.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, you know, like go wild, you know.
And if you've never
But,
been
you know,
there,
when we're out west,
once you go to the LA market, you would understand how that's not a big deal there. So
oh yeah, they have everything. It's
yeah.
incredible. It's like a florist's dream come true. Any of those big flower markets, New York, Chelsea is the same way. I love going to flower markets and seeing just everything. But you know, places like Montana, Wyoming, Cabo, where, you know, you don't have access to product because there's not a wholesaler there. We do kind of take a big step back and I do order everything. And you know, I do allow wiggle room. You know, I'm ingredienting everything out so I know ballpark of what I need, but I usually always order a little bit more just because I know I'm not going to have access to stuff there. But we have spreadsheets to do that. I take a lot of pride in as type B as I am. I have a lot of support by my teammates who are very not as type B as me, and they are very organized, and we have all of that kind of like in the back ready to come out when we need to kind of like hone it in for a travel event. So yeah, Mexico was it was kind of crazy because everyone who I talked to who had done events in Mexico had kind of told me not to do it because they were like sourcing in Mexico is like a whole nother ball game. Everything in Mexico has to be brought in. It's domestic. So you can't like I can't order in the US and have it brought in from the US to Mexico. It has to be brought in from the Mexico City flower markets. And so that was another crazy journey that we went on.
So all the flowers are grown
I
in Mexico?
I don't know that they're grown in Mexico because like I can't imagine like looking at the product. That's what I was told, but looking at the product, I was looking at those roses and I was like, they're not growing all these roses in Mexico. That was what I was told, but I think it's more or less just like you can't be like I think it just has to come from the Mexico City wholesalers. Like I know that all the flowers in Mexico are coming from those wholesalers. I don't think that like I couldn't reach out to you know, Mayesh and have them fly stuff into Mexico for me. It all has to be done through the Mexico City wholesalers, which is what we did. So, and this is also, I would say to anyone getting into travel events, I love to utilize my local resources to like kind of meet people in flower world because flower world is like big but small at the same time.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I actually connected with you guys at Import Flowers and through the grapevine and like connections that y'all had to get connected to Peely in Mexico City, who was she's in charge of Flower House Mexico and she's just the most lovely person ever. And she was actually who I was able to order all my flowers from and get them from Mexico City to Cabo for that wedding.
Oh, she's so sweet. And I'm excited to say that we're talking after Valentine's Day about having her on the podcast. So we're super
Oh,
excited to
good.
hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
I know
she'll be able
lo-
to tell you more about the whole domestic
yeah.
system that they've got going on because she knows everything. She's so smart and like informative about the whole industry. So she'll be a great conversation for sure.
Sure. Well, one of the things I'm kind of curious about, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but you with your creative process, and I know you've mentioned it several times that you have these loose recipes and things. How would you describe your management style?
I would describe my management style as very, oh, gosh, so I don't want this to sound bad, but like hands off, but like encouraging. And I don't want to I would love to ask my employees this question actually. I might ask them after this podcast, or I'm sure they're going to listen, see if they agree. But I'm really into making sure that everyone has kind of like their own creative bubble while kind of maintaining like a really positive work environment. I think that's something that's really important to me is making sure that people are coming to work and obviously getting things done, but having a good time doing it. And feeling encouraged to kind of like be their best. I think a lot of times we can like really stick to like, this is how we do it. This is our process. But I think my best success in training of anyone has been where I've kind of been able to give them loose guidelines of like, hey, this is what I need completed, but I really want to see how you complete it. And I really think that's kind of how I've honed in and what a lot of like my team's strong suits are. And I often, the people I'll hire into positions that, they somewhat stick in, but they almost kind of veer out because I'm like, okay, you're actually a lot better in this role. And like, I need help with this too. So I think it's just for me, always making sure that I'm being encouraging of my employees to really
Mm,
figure out how they shine the best, what their strong suits are, and also making sure they're doing like what they want to do. Because I can truly say, like, the more hands off I've become, the more productive we've become. Like, we get just a crazy amount of stuff done, and we all talk about it. Like, it never actually really feels like work because we're constantly playing. We want work to feel like play, and we want people to feel inspired when they come to work. And so we know how to get down and get to it when we need to, but I think it's really just about making sure that people are growing in the process. I want it to feel like
mm.
a fun and collaborative workplace. So I don't know if that exactly answered it, but I think that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I feel like too, again, it takes practice, I think, to get to that point. I know it's hard sometimes. I feel like in that creative process, because as we talk about here in the podcast a lot, like there'll be things that I might have in my head that somehow I need to convey that to people so that way they
Right.
have the same vision and we're all on the same page. That can be
Correct.
hard, and you don't want to micromanage it because frankly, sometimes somebody might have a different path to that result that's even
Right.
better. And you don't want
Right.
to shoot yourselves in the foot, with that.
Exactly. And I really do think that it takes like the right people to be able to operate in a system like that. Like, I will be the first one to say, like, I have not had luck with like every employee, every person I've brought on. Like, there are people, we all think differently. And I think that's okay. And I think that that's something that we have to like, accept and learn how to handle. But I think when you find a group of people who are just like so honed in on the vision, like, it's when it really works. And, like the three girls I've got, and we have an amazing crew of freelancers behind us too, but the four of us together are just truly so honed into each other's talents. And we actually recently did the whole strength finder thing. So we also try to do a lot of like professional development and just making sure that we're acknowledging where the other people thrive and like learning how to support each other. So it's been really, I really can't say it enough. The four of us that I have on right now just work like a well-oiled machine. Like, we have like everyone's super creative, but then Katie, who's like my right hand, and, I owe everything to Katie. I could talk about Katie for hours and hours and hours. She's one of the most phenomenal people I've met. She's very much like my organized brain. And, when I kind of started this and, I had this very free kind of like, I don't want to say like laissez-faire way of doing things, there were people that it was really rubbing the wrong way because they desired some structure. They needed a little bit more time management. They needed a little bit more like, here's how the day's going to go. And Katie really saw that as a spot where she was going to be able to step in. And she's our operations manager, and she really honed that in. So as much as I can get on here and be like, it's all free and fun and we dance around and just make flowers, Katie has created the most incredible system. So we send out like call sheets to everyone coming in, and we're like really scheduling out our workflow and making sure that everyone knows, where to get at what time. And she's really the organizational brains behind the operation. And so, you come in and you meet me, and I'm a little bit more like free fun, but there's still like schedule to it. And so I don't know, it's taken time to get here, but we've really created kind of this system that just works because we've all really taken each other's talents and just kind of figured out how to amplify them. And it's kind of created this free fun, but still really organized operation.
No, I can understand that and appreciate that, because I do understand that a lot of times, because there is a end goal that at the end of the day, something has to be accomplished. It is good to have some loose structure or structure that kind of at least helps manage expectation as
Right.
you move through that.
Right.
What you mentioned something a second ago, and I wanted to just make sure, as a point of clarity, that I heard it right.
Yeah.
It's you guys went through a program or something, a strength something. What was
Yeah, like
that?
this is Strength Finder 2.0. It's a book you can buy. And this is like so like my business side coming in. It's a book you can buy, on Amazon. I got them for my whole team on Amazon, but it's basically like it has a test in it. And it's an online test, and it really helps like show you what your strengths are. So it has like, different strengths listed on there, and you can kind of, it like levels them out. So you can say like, like my top strength is this, 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 and then like my weaknesses are this, this, this. So I bought them all for my team. We were actually supposed to go on a team retreat at the beginning of January, but it was snowing here. So we're going in a couple weeks, but we're going to kind of go and talk about our strengths and our weaknesses, and kind of like, I think sometimes like I can sit here and say what my strengths are, but when I have it on paper in front of me, it's like so much easier to be like, okay, this is what you're good at. This is what you're bad at. We can kind of talk and learn how to understand each other better and learn what's going on.
Sure. Okay. Well, good. I mean, I think that's helpful, and to have and what was the book called again, just for people?
It's Strength Finder 2.0, and it
Strength
has the
Finder.
test in it. So you then just go online and take the test.
Cool. Okay, good. Well, that's, I hope, helpful to some people, because I feel like a lot of times that opens a lot of eyeballs, when you're the dynamics of working with people and things like that. And
Oh, yeah.
finding that alignment between gifts and tasks and everything is huge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No,
cool.
for sure.
Cool. So, we're getting towards the end of the episode, and I always love to end with an advice question. And so I'm curious what piece of advice you'd love to share with our listeners.
Okay. So I normally would probably share my piece of advice that Rachel gave me about like just take chances and like say yes, even when you think you can't do that. But I already talked about that. So I'd love to come up with something new. Um, okay. I think that my piece of advice, which like I think this is more of just kind of like a life and business piece of advice, is like when you're going and you're doing your thing in your business, and maybe it's not working out, maybe you're having trouble with employees, with people who are working with you, you're not booking clients, is just really to kind of like focus back in and find your why. And really kind of hone in like what is motivating you? Why do you want to do this? And really find the root of what is going to motivate you to keep going. Because I think a lot of times, like as business owners and as florists, it's really easy to kind of get discouraged because we're entrepreneurs, and sometimes it feels like we're all in this on our own. And I think kind of really reaching back in and finding that root why reason, whether it's, because I want to create connections or I want to make beautiful things, really kind of find that and use that to motivate you to push you through those challenges. Because I think that, like I said, it can get so lonely. And I think if you really find those things that keep you going, it's going to be what propels you past those obstacles. And it's just going to make it so much better on the other side. That would be my piece of advice.
Well, I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. I feel like so many times people do feel alone in whatever their moment is, whether, they're figuring out their business, or I love that idea of going back to your why as you find the new path to wherever you're, trying to get and the goals you want to achieve. And
Yeah.
I think that's really awesome. Well, again, we're going to have a page on our website for Madam Florista, and you'll be able to see all things Meg Hutchinson. And I encourage you to follow them on social media and continue to follow along. Thank you, Meg, for being on the Flower Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed talking.